Get rid of that one. Now we're good.
We're live?
We're live.
We are live. What is up, folks at home?
Courtney, we are not lost.
We're just wandering. All that wander are not lost. So what's going on, folks? It's Monday night, and we got a good guest on here for you coming up soon. Get your questions ready. This guy's going to be able to drop some knowledge. He's going to be on here probably 5 or 6, 7 minutes, something like that. Thanks to Ron DeRosa for getting us hooked up with Shawn.
Speaking of
excited
Ron,
about
there
this.
he went.
There's Ron. Yeah, Ron.
Ron sent us some nasty pictures.
Yeah, he had a threesome on an A rig. Pretty sweet. It tripled up. I haven't done that yet. I will. Caught a few doubles. Never did the triple. Caught doubles on top water before. It's only once or twice though. It's pretty rare. Spooks, yeah. It happens this time of year.
Mr. Hank Snow, what's going on? And Bob is in the house. Bob, I still have your memory card to drop by. I'll drop by one of these evenings, but you better have a cold one ready.
We got Aaron on here. What's up, Aaron? Bubbleville Bassin.
I'm looking pale. It's stupid light.
Is it?
Yeah.
You've been eating your vegetables?
I look like Casper.
You haven't been eating your vegetables, man.
No, I haven't actually.
I'm burnt, man. I forgot to put on sunscreen yesterday. I got the raccoon eyes going. Always, it's like those cloudy days where it's cloudy in the morning, then the sun comes out.
Hey, I got color.
There you go. Nice. Looking good. Those cloudy days and you get lazy, you don't put your sunscreen on. Hey, Bubbleville, man. Good luck in that tournament coming up next week. Hope you guys smash them.
Why
You
are
and
you
Shinbone? Shinbone, man. Cracks me up. Got Hank Snow on here.
Yeah, Shinbone. He was actually he was messaging me the other day.
You need to use that spray on tan. You know that
Spray
stuff?
on?
Yeah.
Man, I'm dark. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that spray on tan.
I'm probably
the
darker than you.
do. You probably are. I just kind of get red.
I just got the white light over here. It's killing me.
Get red.
And you're blurry. You're always blurry.
It's because I think I'm still blurry.
Yeah, I don't get it. I keep adjusting it, and it doesn't matter. I don't know.
You do have more light though. I think.
I think it's
A little bit. Yeah, you got more light over here. Me,
I'm over there. Here.
Yeah. It's weird. I'll never get used to that. You guys never did a live stream before. Everything's
Backwards.
opposite. It's like looking in the mirror and trying to do whatever.
Johnny says fashion show or fishing show.
Yeah, we're getting the fashion out of the way first, and then we'll start the fishing show.
No, Hank, there's no pink shirt. I don't get it.
I got the pink shirt on. It's underneath this, though.
Yeah.
I got to wash that thing. Actually, I almost washed it today.
I think you've been saying that for like 3 weeks, though.
I got one more week I can use.
I haven't washed it yet.
We got Joe. What's up, Joe?
Yeah, Bob, the weather is definitely getting good, so I'll definitely stop by one of these evenings, bring it back over.
Got Gary in here.
Ooh, Tom. Oh, that sucks, man.
Oh, my.
4 teeth getting pulled. Whew.
That's rough, man.
I can handle a lot of pain, but not teeth.
Mm-hmm. I've had a couple teeth pulled over the years. It's never fun. Never fun at all. Yeah, Johnny B, I was talking to him on the way up here, and he said the water temps over at Cedar were like 76.
Wow.
So they went from
They
82,
dropped
83.
I would say almost 10 degrees.
Yeah. So by next weekend, it's possible they could be, 72, 73, something like that, because we're supposed to have some really cool nights and overcast days.
Yeah, we're going to get some really good weather. I'd say the next month is going to be phenomenal. I'm hoping. Bill wants to know the top 3 fall baits. I can name mine pretty easy.
Why don't you go with yours?
So definitely a spook or sexy dog, anything like any kind of walking topwater bait is one of my top baits of all time. Spinner bait. As you guys all know, I love throwing spinner baits in the spring and fall. That's my 2 favorite times to throw them. And to be honest with you, a fluke. A fluke is a killer bait for the fall.
Yep. On grass lakes, it's going to be a frog and some sort of punching bait when the bait gets up in the grass.
I went late fall.
Late fall?
Yeah. I wasn't even thinking early fall for punching and stuff, but
yeah.
You get a lot more of that though. You fish a lot of the 9 lakes over there with that.
Yeah, the thicker grass. It's starting to get there. It won't be long. And man, it's hard to narrow it down to 3.
Yeah.
You still got to have something to drag the bottom with. Like I'd probably just go with a jig, because your jig's kind of a multi-purpose tool. You can get out deep, fish the points and all that stuff, but you can still come in tight and flip shallow cover. But man, a spinnerbait would be my 4th one for sure.
Yeah.
You know,
spinnerbait,
chatterbait, swim jig. You know, that
summer
rotation.
is about the only time I really put a spinnerbait down.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, other than that, I've always got one tied on.
Yeah, I don't fish it as much, but there's definitely days, if you get some windy days and overcast, you still catch them on it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And you can catch them out deep too.
If you get them,
Channels again,
it is. Yes.
Okay, we're back. I don't know what happened. We had a little, just all of a sudden, everything just disappeared.
That was really weird.
You left the room and came back, and boom, it was happening again.
Yep. Gary says technical difficulties.
Yeah, technical difficulties. Apologize, boys and girls. We missed some. I think we missed a couple comments up there.
Oh, I'm sure we did. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea what happened.
I'm glad it kept everything.
It was weird. Yeah, because his cell phones still show the Wi-Fi signal, but the computer just went gone.
It pulled everything up too. I know right here. Let's see, Rest Tom. That was very much fun. Aaron said Mark Twain was tough. One short Saturday during pre-fish and one keeper yesterday. But it was $95 fish though.
Hey, there you go, man.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Made a little gas money.
Jay said he went Friday. Temps were 73.
Where'd you go, Jay? Hank says Gabe was a punching fool in the last video. Yeah, I was punching, man. I was punching like Mike Tyson.
He didn't mean to put the punching part in there. Just a fool.
Just a fool, yeah. I was punching. I didn't catch a whole bunch, but I was punching. I was practicing my flipping.
Pond over here has a lot of overgrowth, but that's where I'm catching most of the bass and crappie. Should I cut the growth down or wait?
You mean around the bank edges and stuff, as far as say overhanging trees and grass? If that's the case, you know, I think you need to leave some of that in there. I mean, if it's really overgrown, definitely cut some of it down, but I wouldn't clear it all the way. That gives the fish shade, gives the bluegill protection from birds and things from above.
Yep. And I've heard for a long time now that's if you leave that taller grass beside a pond like that, it's good for the bluegill and the smaller fish because all the bugs get into the water then.
Yeah, your grasshoppers and all that stuff. So I definitely would encourage you to leave some of that.
Connor Lacey says, try blue wing at Pyramid.
Try blue wing at Pyramid.
You went there, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I fished blue wing. Yep.
Yeah.
I'll go check that one out again. It was fishing a little bit tough that day. I did catch a few fish there.
Sean's in the house there. Seen him show up. The back. Somebody reel him in. Oh, Tom may be down and out, but he's got a sense of humor yet.
Jay says the World Shooting Complex in Sparta. Okay. Yeah, it's gonna. Yeah, I think it's in the 70s now for good. Just looking at the 10-day forecast, I don't see any warm weather down the road at all.
No. Sean said he got one today, about 3 pounds on a frog finally.
Nice. Yeah.
Said he caught 7 of them, so nothing wrong with that. Anyone been in Devil's Kitchen recently? Heading down there next week. I don't ever fish up. You do sometimes.
I haven't been there in a while, but our guest Shawn can tell you a little bit about that. Like we had a short conversation last night about Devil's Kitchen, about the stunted growth there. There's a lot of like 11-inch fish in Devil's Kitchen, and it just unfortunate. There's some big ones in there now. There's some really big ones in there. You know, every once in a while somebody will catch like a 8, 9, 10 pounder out of there, and they stocked. You know, they have a rainbow trout population in that lake, and that's what causes some of those bass to get big. But it's definitely stunted. I'm not exactly sure why, other than, you know, maybe people aren't harvesting enough fish. There was a time we'd fish that Little Egypt Bass Club over there used to have a 2-day tournament. I don't know if they do anymore, but I'd fished that a couple years, and they encouraged everybody to keep fish. Instead of releasing them, they would take the 12 inchers out of the lake and put them in other lakes in the surrounding area just to try to clean out some of those smaller fish. But it was tough to catch. It was tough to catch 12-inch fish. I mean, I remember that was I think you could harvest 12 fish in that tournament per boat. It was just a buddy tournament. And it was hard to catch, you know, it was hard to catch 6 or 7 over 12 inches. Catch a lot of 11 and a half inchers. It's frustrating. You're just sitting there bumping 11 and a half inch fish, 11 and a half. You know, if you catch a 14 incher, it feels like a 12 pounder.
Yeah.
That's
the Lake Wapello. Clearwater.
Gerardo can be like that. Lake Gerardo can be like that. There's a lot of small fish in there. I mean, there's some good fish in there too.
Mr. White Whale's in the house. What's going on, dude?
They don't typically show up until the spring or late fall.
Let's see. Connor said that also tried Pygmyville City Lake. There have been 3 8-pounders caught since the beginning of September.
Jesus.
Holy cow.
I heard that's a pretty solid lake. There's a couple of those.
I've never fished there.
Yeah, I haven't either. There's a couple of those lakes over there in that area that are pretty good lakes.
Larry Lee just got on. Selective harvest does help a lake out a bunch. Jay, I 100% agree with that. We've had the conversation many times on here. I can show you my pond, what it was when I first got it back in 2011, I think. It was 8 and 9-inch bass all day long. I mean, the bluegill were just enormous, but we finally started calling some of them bass out of there, and it's made a complete turnaround. It's pretty healthy right now.
I see Shawn there in the background. Shawn, we got a couple more questions here. We'll finish up, and then we'll jump in with you. Somebody asked about the Pickwick tournament, white whale fishing. Man, it was disappointing. It was a great time. First of all, I'll say it was a great time. The camaraderie was excellent. We keep meeting people. We keep meeting teams, like the people that will stay in the hotels, the same hotel with us. You end up striking up conversations with folks in the morning before the tournament and after a day of fishing. So we've got a couple groups of guys that we saw last year and this year that recognized us and we recognized them. So we've kind of struck up a friendship with that. And then, of course, at the pre-tournament meeting and the tournament day, you're talking to people. So that's really nice to meet some long distance friends. The swag, the gear that we got was awesome. I'll probably do a little short video. Yeah, man, we got some like Carhartt goodies and a nice bag. Got all kinds of goodies. I'll probably do a short video just to show all that stuff. So if you guys are ever thinking about going to do that, you
That's
can
why I
see
miss-
one of the reasons why you
Yeah.
should go do it.
That's why I missed the Strike King tournament over at Kincaid when they used to do it over there. That was fun over there. And it was always a good turnout. And like I said, almost everybody walked away with something.
Yeah, it's a good time, and you get fed. You know, you got at the pre-tournament meeting. There is we had tacos. We had chicken tacos and pork tacos, which is really nice. And then I got to talk to Gerald Swindle for a long time, like probably 20 minutes.
Now I'm a little jealous.
Yeah, he was just those guys were just
Over
down
the
there.
tacos.
Over the tacos.
Over
No,
the tacos.
I was
I'm jealous over the tacos.
It was over the tacos. Yeah, who cares about Swindle? He went to chicken tacos. It was pre-tacos, but there's a couple other guys down there from this area. Trey and Justin were down there. We hung out with them a little bit. They got plenty of G-Man time and Ike and Ellie time, and then Terry Scroggins was over there, so it was cool to hang out with those guys. Yeah. You know, Swindle, man, he is nonstop. I guess a lot of those pros are too, but once they show up and they're approached by people, they just talk, and then the next people come in, and you don't realize that until you sit back and you're around them for 20 or 30 minutes, but they're just nonstop talking. So a lot of energy. A lot of energy.
There's a big question there for you. I didn't want you to miss.
Hey, Tin Horse Monty, the pink shirt's on underneath here.
You guys just keep bringing it up.
You gotta keep bringing it up, man. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Tom asked about Duck Lake in here.
Duck Creek. Yeah, I haven't been down to Duck Creek.
Gary Faulkner, what do you guys think of Perryville Conservation Lake? I'm guessing you're talking about Perry County, and I would say there's a lot of people who complain about that. I'm telling you that it's a phenomenal lake. It really is. You just have to figure it out. That's all.
Larry says the bite is on Table Rock. Yeah, I saw that tournament. There was a tournament this weekend. Took some really good weights. And then Toyotas are nice. We rode down there in a Tundra, a 2018 Tundra, and Mike just got a Tundra, and they're pretty nice. So they're a little more pricey. They got more resale value. But I think
away from your Dodge.
I don't know. I thought about it. I don't know what my next truck will be. Depends on my finances at that time. So, well, let's get Shawn on here. He's back there waiting. I'm sure he's got stuff to do later this evening. So,
how's it going, Shawn?
Good. How about yourself?
Oh,
doing great, man. Thanks for jumping on here with us. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
So, why don't you tell the folks at home your name, what you do, and that kind of stuff? Just a little short introduction.
My name's Shawn Hirst. I'm the fish biologist for Jackson County and what we call the Wren Lake Complex. I've been working as a fish biologist in Illinois. I'm in my 26th year. Moved to the southern part of the state in March of '98, and we'll be here for a lot longer than that.
Good deal. I was curious how long you've been doing that. 26 years. That's quite a career. I've been with the Postal Service 26 years, and I just keep coming back. They keep letting me clock in, so I'm going to keep on doing it.
Well, I worked about 2.5 years for the state of Georgia, and then moved up here, and I'm settled in. I love it down here.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area. I've thought about. I always wanted to move to Colorado, and any place you go on vacation, it seems like you want to go there. But then when I get home, I'm like, this is home. It's perfectly fine here. And the more you're in an area, the more you get comfortable with people around you, and you get lifelong friends. And it's just, I don't think I'm going anywhere either.
I don't have no plans on it.
So, got folks at home. This is the opportunity to get some questions up here. This guy knows a lot about this area, about the fisheries, and this is the guy to ask questions to. So, I want to start off with one question. I've always been curious of the types of grass that are in Cedar Lake. You got is it milfoil or coontail? Are they the same, one and the same over there? The predominant grass.
There's some of each. Coontail looks more like it's like the shape of a raccoon's tail. It'll be a whorled leaf attachment, and it'll grow big. And then you can have milfoil, and you can have what's called Eurasian milfoil. There's two types of milfoil as well, and those are really common in almost every lake that we have down here.
Okay. I always called it milfoil and coontail. I didn't know that there was actually a difference in the two.
So I've got one question here that, Gabe and I, we call it witch's hair. It's a real just nasty, pungent, black, slimy. I don't even know what you call it.
It's like a moss. It grows on the bottom of the lake in some areas, like on some points. What actually is that?
If there's no leaves, roots, stems, flowers, it would be some type of what we call filamentous algae. Grows on the bottom in mats, and then it'll float up to the top of the lake or the pond. There's another more advanced form of algae called Chara, Chara, and when you smash that in your hand, it actually smells kind of like skunky.
Yeah.
Sometimes call it skunk grass, but I would imagine what you're seeing is either filamentous algae or Chara, depending on
Yeah, it's got a nasty smell to it. I'll say that.
Yeah, it's that would be my guess. Is it's Chara.
Okay. Yeah, and it's not spread throughout the whole lake. It'll just be in certain areas, and it seems to if it does spread, it's really, really slow spreading algae or whatever it is.
Well, if it's any form of filamentous algae, it can only grow where sunlight hits the bottom of the lake. But then when it flows to the surface, it'll blow all over wherever it'll go. But it grows on the bottom, and then you'll see farm ponds covered in it, but it only grows in the shallow and then it floats up to the top.
That would make sense of why it's on the shallow banks then.
Yeah, I don't like that. It's
in a lake like Cedar, it can get attached at the surface to the milfoil beds, the coontail beds, and it may not blow around as much. It's on the surface, and then there's submerged rooted plants beneath it.
Okay.
That makes a little bit more sense. Yeah, definitely.
We got a question on there from Johnny B right there.
Right here.
Throw that up on the screen. Can you see that question?
Yes.
Okay.
Our natural bait in all of our lakes in Illinois is called a gizzard shad. There's another type of shad that we can find them in the rivers. We have them in Newton and Baldwin. It's called a threadfin shad. It's more predominant in southern states. It can't really survive the winters here. But for years, when available, we've tried to move them from Baldwin to a lot of our local lakes, including Cedar. And if it works right, we have to wait for the receiving bodies to warm up enough, but we got to get them out of Baldwin before they spawn. And Baldwin's always, being a power plant lake, much warmer. So we have typically about a 2-week opportunity in the spring to get them if we can get them. We bring them back, we put them in Cedar. They'll get a spawn off, and then those young a year will actually spawn again late summer. And then as the fall feed goes on, those fish start struggling as it starts getting towards 60 degrees. And the advantage with those threadfins is maximum size is maybe 3 or 4 inches. Where I collected a gizzard shad this week, it was 2 pounds.
Wow.
But the problem is and they, in recent years, we've had 1 or 2 years where they actually, if there's a mild winter, they've overwintered in both Cedar and Kincaid. Now, the bad part now is we have Asian carp in Baldwin, and I've been told by the higher ups that I will not be allowed to move those shad anymore for fear of moving Asian carp from Baldwin. Because one thing is those little Asian carp look just like a shad, and that's why we have those regulations. Where you collect the bait is where you have to use the bait. You can't catch it in the river and go to a lake because we're scared to death somebody's going to move these Asian carp into our inland lakes, which to this point we haven't seen.
Yeah, that'd be a travesty. Ooh.
So most of the shad that we're seeing in Cedar are gizzard shad?
They are gizzard shad, yes. I wasn't able to move any this spring, and like I said, they changed the policy where I can't move them anymore, and I don't believe they've overwintered the last couple winters. But when it works, it's we collect those fish in the fall when we're doing our surveys, so we know that it works. And then we've seen them the following spring in Cedar before we even stocked them before. But that was rare. But we tried to do that every year if we could get those fish. And we would do that in Cedar, Kincaid, Forbes, Little Grassy, Devil's Kitchen, Crab Orchard, Rend. We tried to do it. If we could get them in Baldwin, we'd move them all around as like a seed stocking, a supplemental forage stocking every year.
Okay. You just mentioned Devil's Kitchen. We had somebody before you got on here asking about Devil's Kitchen, and I know we spoke about that a little bit last night on my ride home from Pickwick. So what's your theory on why the fish, or the bass at least, are kind of stunted over there in Devil's Kitchen?
When you have a stunted bass population, they typically stunt out at 10, 11, 12, maybe 13 inches, and they just knock off the prey base so that there's not enough big prey for the bass to get any bigger. And occasionally you'll have a cannibal largemouth that'll get bigger, and he gets big enough, his mouth's big enough, he can start feeding on trout and some other prey species that are in there. And that's why you'll see every once in a while a 10-pound or a big fish will come out of Devil's Kitchen, but the majority of them are stunted 10 to 14 inches. You can't feed your way out of it. You couldn't put enough bait in there to do it. You got to thin the bass out, and the statewide limit's 6 fish, and it's hard for, and most bass anglers are not interested, one, in taking any bass, or two, the meat you're going to get off something that small is not real desirable. But we try to encourage, like, maybe if crappie anglers are there and they're going to dirty a knife anyway, to try to keep their 6 little bass, or in cedar they can keep 5, but we just haven't seen a lot of thinning out. The other thing that we're blessed with, it's rare to have a public lake with too many bass in it, but we just have so many lakes down here, we can spread that pressure out some. And so, like, Cedar has too many little bass. A lot of the pyramid lakes are that way. Devil's Kitchen, Little Grassy to an extent, but the only way to do anything about it is to thin them out some. And it's we can't just go out there and shock and take hundreds and hundreds of them. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah. So you'd almost have to redo that lake to get it, to say a trophy lake or something that would be, would have produced some 3 or 4 pound, 5 pound fish regularly.
When I was listening earlier, I think Greg was talking about a stunted farm pond he had, and farm ponds are small enough you can thin those bass out and get some larger size fish in it. But when you have a big open system, it's just not really possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you got to remember, say, everybody bands together and keeps 1,000 bass this year. Well, there's 1,000 young a year coming along. They're spawning continually every year as well. So you got those coming through too. But
how about muskie? What if you release muskie into that lake?
The muskie are going to eat the most abundant prey item that's there, which is going to be gizzard shad. Now, they would eat a bass or two, but I mean, we've got a ton of young year bass in Kincaid, and that's one of the best muskie lakes around. And there's more bass in that lake now than when we first introduced muskie in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you always hear the horror stories of people complaining that once they put muskie in a lake, it just ruined the lake, and that's not necessarily the case.
When I first got here, it was really bad. There was a lot of sentiment against it, and we'd find muskies stuck up on trees, and I tried to talk to the bass clubs and explain it, but there was some, and I don't know how to say it nicely, just older gentlemen set in their ways, and they didn't want to hear anything that you had to say. But and what will happen sometimes is a muskie will bite on a crappie or a bass that somebody's got on their line. Well, that just looks like a lure or an injured animal, and any predator is going to come after something like that. So
it's no different than reeling a bluegill in and having a bass eat it.
Yeah, it's they're not going to swim through 1,000 shad to find a bass. And the funny part is that they claim that they won't eat a 15 3/4 inch bass at Kincaid. They're only going to eat a keeper over there. See what I mean? That's like the running joke. And for years, it was the bass guys couldn't keep the muskies off their lures, and the muskie guys said they can catch bass all the time. And I said, well, why don't you guys just enter each other's tournaments, stake each other's money, and have a good time at it?
Yeah.
Exactly. All of our muskie lakes have really healthy bass populations, and we limit the muskies aren't reproducing. It's a very limited stocking. And there's some predation going on, but like I said, they're not going to swim through 1,000 shad to try to find a bass over there.
Yeah. See, I know, I live in Perry County, which is right across the river. We've got our public lake here, and they stock stripers in there to kind of help with the gizzard shad a little bit, because our gizzard shad over here, they're so abundant. And if you get that lake to freeze in the winter, an inch or two. As soon as it thaws out, I mean, it looks like a sea of gizzard shad floating everywhere out there.
Yeah, we'll have that in all of our lakes, winter kill of shad. And one theory, they call it the top-down theory. Some of these systems will lock up with real big shad that are too big for that most bass to eat. And the theory is if you can get a big predator like a striper in there to thin those out, that stimulates those bigger gizzard shad to reproduce more, and you have different year classes and a lot lot more young a year fish. And we even will do what's called on a few lakes, not very many, a selective rotenone. Rotenone is a chemical pesticide that kills fish, but if you put it in a real small quantity, the shad are super sensitive to it. So there's a few lakes I tried it on DeCoin a few years ago and just didn't have real good luck. But we'll try to purposely kill thousands of shad to stimulate the reproduction of the shad.
That makes sense.
So but that's called top down. But we actually have pure stripers in cedar that are doing real well. Some of the federal hatcheries are finally getting back into raising fish that people actually want to catch. And I got hooked up with it's down in Arkansas. And so we're going to get a few more pure stripers regularly stocked in the Cedar Lake, which is kind of a nice, I mean, there's not many places to catch those in Illinois other than some opportunities on the river. Lake Sandcrest and Cedar are about the only 3 places for pure stripers in the state of Illinois.
Yeah, the stripers are doing really good over there in Cedar. They're pretty not predominant, but they're definitely something that you'll catch if you spend enough time out there on that lake. I've caught a few pretty good stripers out of there like the last couple of years. So
yeah, it's been real sporadic stocking because they're very hard to find in terms of hatchery system. But now that federal hatchery in Arkansas is raising them again, I'm hoping we'll be able to get more regular stockings and have a few more year classes in its cedar.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got a good question up here. It's from White Whale here. Let you read all that. You'll understand more of it than I will.
Eurasian milfoil is an invasive plant. It's non-native. The just milfoil is the native one. The Eurasian can get really deep and grow in a lot deeper water. And you want a certain percent, maybe it's hard to say, but big multi-species public lakes benefit from weeds because it gives a place for the young year bass to hide until they're big enough that they're not going to get preyed on. But the problem is, and you see it in more in farm ponds, if you get too many weeds, the prey has too many places to hide and the predators can't find it. So you want a few weeds for habitat and for protection. It benefits the anglers. We call it the edge effect, where the predators are kind of hanging right along the edge or waiting to ambush along the edge of that. And it's similar to when they got rid of a bunch of fence rows and the quail and pheasants disappeared. It was because the fox and the coyotes were just hunting the edges and wiping them out. It's similar in a lake. The problem is you can't it's hard to control where the weeds grow and where they don't.
Yeah.
And that causes a lot of problems in private ponds and some in public lakes. And one thing we got to be real careful with, like in Cedar and Kincaid and Wren are potable water supply lakes. So you just can't go dump chemicals around ramps and try to clean them up because you got to watch the environmental concerns with people drinking that water.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no kidding.
So this question here has been brought up probably for the last 2 months.
Yeah.
So see what your thoughts are on this.
Lake of Egypt is probably the only public lake in the state that we don't have what's called a cooperative management agreement with. Before my time, somebody didn't get along with someone else and they just never wanted us down there. Typically though, with power plant lakes, it'll slow the growth down, but it's not going to make it completely detrimental. One thing with power plant lakes is you've got to watch, especially some of these peak plants, they get so hot in the summer that the big adult fish, they can't take that thermal heat like a younger fish can. And so you might have great growth and might be going guns blazing for 5 or 10 years. Well, you get a hot summer and everybody's running their air conditioner, you can lose all the adult fish. And we had that at Baldwin a few years ago. So it'll definitely slow the growth of the fish down. But if the population structure is good, I don't think it'll have too much of a detrimental effect.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine that those fish that are used to the upper 40s and low 50-degree water temperature, at least in the lower end of the lake on Egypt, will have to, their metabolism is definitely going to slow down this year when they're not getting those water temperatures. It's going to be a new lake for some of those fish.
Yeah.
They've never experienced low 40-degree water temps.
And we've noticed that sometimes in those power plant lakes, they grow, that it's like they're partying. They grow fast, they're living hard, but they don't live long.
Yeah.
But you still see real nice, like Baldwin's coming back, where you see just tremendous growth and real nice health. But when they start getting big, and if you get 100 degrees at the surface, that's tough on those bass in the summertime. The big adult bass everybody wants to catch.
Yeah, heat's hard on the fat girls. They can't hang.
It's hard on the fat guys too.
Right. So throw that one up there from Johnny B. I'm curious about this one too.
I wouldn't have any idea without a picture or something.
Okay.
And that phone number I left, or that's under, that's a cell phone that I can take, people can text me. But if you have a picture of it, I'd be glad to look at it. One other thing but I don't want to forget to mention, we have a website that's called ifishillinois.org, and it's got a lot of information about every public lake, what we've stocked. A lot of times the fish attractor maps will be on that website. And there's also a booklet on there, aquatic weeds and plant management in Illinois, it works like a key where you might be able to key some of these things out. But if somebody takes a picture of it, I'd be glad to try to ID it. But if you can get a picture of the leaf, if it has a flower or seed, if you can tell me if it's rooted to the bottom or free floating or growing from the edge and out across the surface, all that type of stuff kind of helps us ID what it would be.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll get some pictures of that because it's a grass that it's a shore grass. It doesn't grow out deeper than probably 2 foot, and it almost looks like a house plant. It's got almost an oval shaped leaf with a point on it. It's a lighter green color, and it's something that Johnny B, he fishes that lake a lot as well, and we've really noticed it the last 2 or 3 years. It's gotten plentiful enough that we've noticed it more. It may have been there the whole time, but we're seeing a lot more of it. So we'll take some pictures of that and try to get that to you.
Yep. And that number is down in the description for anybody that's got questions or whatever. So
And
put an email down there too.
I don't know. I can't remember if I've seen it out there. But we see it everywhere. There's a plant like that called water willow. It's not the tree. It's an actual plant that grows about a foot tall. I don't know if I describe it as oval shaped leaves, but they come out to a point. They look like a willow leaf, but it's a plant that gets about a foot or two high, and it just grows in the shallow areas. But you'll see it at Crab. We saw it today at Forbes Lake. It's real good habitat.
Okay.
Ron did want to know is there thread fin in Egypt, but
that I don't know. Like I said, I've never been to Egypt to sample it, so I don't know. We don't that's the one lake we don't sample every year.
Gotcha. This is actually a pretty good question. I think a couple of us are probably curious about.
Yes. Typically, the smallmouth get out-competed by largemouth no matter where they're at. I had access to some rearing ponds, meaning we could raise some fish from fingerling up to 4 or 5 inches before we stocked them in the lake. At that same time, the Kincaid Conservancy District was working with the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, and they got some grants, and they did about 6 or 7 miles of shoreline riprap habitat to stop erosion in the lake. And I thought it would be a perfect time to introduce smallmouth and hope they would relate to that rock. We stocked over, that was about a 10-year period, about 60,000 smallmouth from 4 to 10 inches. And anglers were catching them. We'd see a few in our surveys, but they just basically disappeared. There's one theory that the males maybe don't protect the nest as well as like a largemouth does. But we just weren't seeing them. Anglers weren't catching them anymore. And our law officers weren't seeing any evidence of it. We had, in 2010, there was 2 legal fish caught in a tournament. And I thought, here we go, it's game on, and they just disappeared. Now, one thing I have noticed over there, the bass are skinny until they get to about 14 inches. And you see this at Cedar as well. And my theory is at 14 inches, I think it's maybe mouth size is big enough that a whole prey base opens up to those fish. because you got 13-inch fish that are just normal little fish, and then you get 14 and 15 inches that look like footballs. And if you think smallmouth's named because it has a small mouth, it would take it even longer to have a big enough mouth to take advantage of that prey base. And Kincaid had a real healthy largemouth population to begin with. I just hoped supplementally it would help, and there's no other really places to catch them down here. And that's why I kind of wanted to try them. We tried them at 2 lakes at Pyramid. They just didn't work there because there was other fish in those lakes already. I know that there was one caught about a month ago that was about 4 pounds. So there's probably still some in the lake, but I don't think they ever reproduced. And the ones that we put in, like I said, they just basically petered out.
Yeah, that's a bummer. I mean, that would be nice. I mean, I'm with you on that. It would have been nice to have, a smallmouth population.
I thought it would have been great over there with the deep banks and the deeper holes that it's got over there in the boulders and bluff walls.
Well, there's plenty of forage and habitat, and I just think if the largemouth population wasn't so dense, they might have had a chance. But a lot of places that you see them, like I do a little bit of smallmouth stream fishing in Missouri, and they're losing a lot of smallmouth over there because spotted bass have moved in, and they kind of just take over, and that's just kind of how it works with the smallmouth, unfortunately.
Yeah. Gary did have a question for you there.
Not in the age of COVID-19 for sure. But yeah. Typically we don't have anybody on the boat just because of liability. Now, sometimes if we have a lake manager or somebody we work with that helps us manage the lake, we might have them out. But if people see us out there, they're welcome to, watch us work the fish up when we're done. What we typically do is run about a half hour or an hour, and then we sit there and work the fish up. And our boats stand out. I mean, we're not out there undercover where you can't figure out what we're doing. And the other thing is we're on the water somewhere every single day, and it's just hard to if we get rain one day or coworker gets sick, the whole schedule's changed, and it's hard to coordinate with all these different people. And you got to understand, we're working with dangerous electricity, and so somebody's driving, somebody's netting. You got to make sure these other people that aren't as experienced aren't reaching down in the water, or if they're sitting on the boat, we have like a protective railing up in the front, and we just don't have the room to take a lot of spectators with us.
Now, when you go on these electro surveys, do you typically shock the same section of a given lake every year? And also, what are the best times to do a good survey?
We survey in the spring and fall because it only works about 6 or 8 foot deep. We do the same locations, and we try to do them at the same time of year. Now, you'll have temperature variations from year to year, but typically when like today we did Forbes. Next year Forbes will be done the same week, probably next year. And you'll always see us running along the shoreline because the field is strong in the middle and weak along the edges. And so you're actually, if there's habitat, those fish will stay there and you can get them. But you also are trapping them against the bank. So you'll rarely see it shocking out in open water because the fish are just going to swim away from you. So you'll always see us in the spring and fall when the fish are in shallow sampling. In the summertime, we're typically doing stream surveys and river surveys where the fish can't hide from you and go deep.
Yeah.
You could go out at Kincaid in the heat of summer and you're just not going to see the bigger fish. They're just going to be down deep.
Now does the acidity of the water make a difference for how you're able to survey those fish?
It's not the acidity so much as what we call the conductivity, and that's the dissolved nutrients and ions that are in the water, and that's what actually conducts the electricity. So you cannot shock like salt water. And we run into some problems up at Pyramid from the mining activity. Those waters have real high conductivity. Doesn't mean they're polluted or they did anything wrong. They just stirred up the soils and the minerals, and we just can't put enough electricity into the water to temporarily stun the fish. So there's a certain range of conductivity where we can and can't work. And most of those strip cuts, like up at Pyramid, we just can't shock the fish. It doesn't work.
Yeah, and even if you did have the right water to do that, it's so deep. A lot of those lakes, they drop off pretty fast, so it's hard to get those fish up shallow.
And another thing that can hurt us in some places, it's crystal clear. We're standing up on a boat with a net with a generator running and a motor running, and we're not, in a sneaking up with a trolling motor going, and so anytime there's a lay down or something like that, we get a lot of fish when there's a lay down because they think they're hidden and they stay there for us.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
I got another question from Johnny B here. He is full of great questions tonight.
There was a study done by the Illinois Natural History Survey years ago comparing the Florida strains, and they just didn't do well here. And also, I guess they're harder to catch, supposedly, but they just did not do well in our waters with our temperatures.
Makes sense.
I got a grass question for you. I've always been curious, how does aquatic vegetation reproduce?
Some things have what's called rhizomes or tubers, and that would be like your lotus, water lilies, that type of thing. If anyone is familiar with like the Coin City Lake, you'll have a bunch of lotus plants up there, and it has these big tubes, almost like a potato type thing that's down in the mud. Some of the other ones, like the water willow, it just has runners and runs along in the shallow water. And then there's other plants like milfoil and coontail that can be spread by, it just gets chopped up and it'll float to a new spot and then start growing. Fragmentation, they call it. So there's the different species of plants have different modes of how they reproduce and take over an area.
Okay, that's interesting.
This is, I don't know if you've noticed this or not.
That would be right back to thermal stress. As the stripers grow older and get bigger, they can't take the heat. Doesn't matter how deep the lake is. There's typically in Cedar and Kincaid, they stratify in the summers at about 15 or 16 feet. And that means there's no oxygen below that. So they're in the coldest water that still has oxygen, and it may not be cold enough for them if we have a really hot summer.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah. Another thing I think might happen is when you hook a 20-pound fish on 12-pound line, so you've got a medium rod, you don't quite have the horsepower to get that fish in quick. Typically, you're fighting that fish for a longer period of time, and you're going to cause that fish to be stressed out. And if you're got that fish out of the water for a long time, a person catches a 20-pound fish, they're going to want to get some pictures. They're going to kind of want to and ooh at it for a while. And if you've got that fish out of the water for a long period of time after that long of a fight, it's highly likely that you've stretched that fish out beyond repair, basically. So when you let that fish go, it's not going to survive. And then you add the higher water temperatures in the summer and the lack of, the ideal conditions for it, whether you've caught it or not. That's going to lead to a higher mortality. That's just my opinion on that. So, and the reason I know that is because I did a video a couple years ago where I caught a really nice striper, and some guys commented on that video and said, please, when you catch those fish, release them as soon as possible because they're not quite as hardy as some of the other game fish. So that's my opinion on that.
That's all true. The other thing, I grew up fishing and swimming in farm ponds, and in the summer, it might be 80 or 90 at the surface and your feet are cold. If you dive down deep or you jump down deep, when these lakes stratify down where those stripers are or the big muskies, it might be 70 degrees. And then you're bringing them up to 100-degree water at the surface, and they can't take that stress. When we stock fish, sometimes we have to what's called temper them. If the holding water and the water in the hatchery truck's a lot warmer or a lot colder than the receiving water, the lake we're stocking them into, you may have to sit there and run water from the lake into the tank to gently bring that temperature up or down so they're a little bit closer together. Now, typically here with warm water species, we don't have that problem, but you would have to, you couldn't bring in muskies from Minnesota in 50-degree water, dump them in Kincaid in 100-degree water. They're going to die within probably 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's kind of the same theory as if you go to a tropical fish store and you buy a pet fish in a little bag, they want you to set it in the water for
exactly. That's tempering the fish. Exactly. And it also, as those fish get older, they can't take that thermal stress. And the majority of the muskie anglers at Kincaid, they'll self-regulate, and once the surface hits 80 degrees, they won't fish anymore, because you can catch that fish, get it in as fast as you can, and turn it loose, and it's probably going to die, especially a bigger and a trophy-sized fish.
That's good to know that. So yeah, you guys catch one of those big fish, release it as soon as possible. Give it a chance to survive.
So Whitewell's got another great question here again about one of his public lakes.
It would depend on what else is in there. If it's an old rock quarry, it may not be real productive to begin with. The most productive areas in any lake is shallow water where sunlight can get to the bottom. That's the productive zone. If you don't have any of that, you got to have sunlight getting to the bottom so the fish can spawn. You got to have shallow water where sunlight will go, where they can build a nest. That can depress it. If there's gizzard shad in it, there's probably a lot of other what we call rough fish, and those fish are all going to eat little bass or compete with little bass for food. Stocking more bass and no bass harvest would be the best way to try to improve it. But it's hard to. It's a good question, but I need more information because it could be a number of different things. But typically, it's going to be poor reproduction and a lot of other fish. Now, I've seen situations like that have bass crowded situations because they just don't have enough to eat. If the lake is acidic in nature, it's not going to be real productive, just like a farm field. When I was in South Georgia and Alabama, there was actually private pond management firms that would come out and lime and fertilize your farm pond to almost double the standing stock of fish you could have in there. Now, most of our lakes aren't acidic. And you have to watch in this area. Fertilizing would improve the numbers of pounds of fish per acre. But if you were to then get ice cover with snow, you'd have a winter fish kill from oxygen depletion by adding all that organic matter. So we don't fertilize farm ponds up here, and very rarely do we fertilize bigger lakes up here.
Okay. Tom wants to know, are there smallmouth in Baldwin?
Yes.
Yes.
They are stocked by our hatchery system. Now, I don't know how well they're doing. I haven't sampled that lake, but they've been stocked there in the past, and there are some there now. And I've been told that that's coming back. I mean, it was really dead. We chocked it. I think 3 years ago I was involved, and we got a 3 bass in an hour. And on Cedar, we'll get about 150 an hour. That's how bad the fish kill was. But they restocked some young year bass because it's a power plant lake. Those bass just took off. And I don't think it's not a secret now that it's down. It's back, and I would definitely go there. And I can't promise you catch a smallmouth, but the bass population is definitely coming back at Baldwin.
Well, here's Johnny B with another one of his great questions this evening.
The best big fat, that's, again, a loaded question. When I give talks to school kids, I say, do you want to catch a lot of fish or do you want to catch big fish? And they want to catch a lot of big fish. So, I mean, you typically have one or the other. 10-pound fish are extremely rare. The only place I've seen them in here is Devil's Kitchen, and also about a 20-acre lake at Ferncliff State Park. And what they both have in common is the stockable trout program. And trout are long, slender, spineless, and when they're raised on pellets in a hatchery, they're dumber than a box of rocks.
Yeah. So
some of the bass that get big enough and transition onto those trout will get up to 10 pounds, but they're extremely rare. If you want to, the most 5 and 6 pound fish is going to be cedar, but we've seen 7 and 8 there, but there's so many bass and there's so many 4, 5s, and 6s that you don't get a lot of 8s just because there's just so much competition. We'll see some big bass at Kincaid. And I think the year before last at Crab, there was like an 11 something caught in a tournament. One of the bigger, I don't know if it was the Harkins tournament or which the Boy Scouts or one of those. But Trophy Monsters is going to be Devil's Kitchen or Ferncliff. But like I said, I would never send anybody and guarantee you that that's where you're going to catch it. Now, the only lake that's better than Cedar locally, and it's not really local, Newton Lake. It's a couple hours away in the middle of nowhere. It's a power plant lake with a 25 horse limit. It has more and bigger fish, But again, you don't see the monsters because they burn themselves out because they're growing so fast.
So I got a question about cedar. Would you say that back in, let's say 15, 20 years ago, when you did the surveys, would you say it was higher? It was more likely that you would shock up a 6, 7, and an 8 pounder than it is nowadays?
No. When I first came, the regulation was 2 under and 2 over with a 14 to 18 inch slot limit. And we were getting complaints about people keeping 2 18 inchers every time they went. A lot of the fish were stacking up below that 14 inch slot limit. And what we're trying to do is get fish in that slot limit, because when they get to that magic 14 inch, they just take off. They grow, they're fat, they're healthy. And all the anglers I talked to, I'd say, hey, did you keep your 2 bass today? Your 2 little ones under 14. Well, nobody wanted to keep anything that small and that few. So I changed the regulation years ago to 5 under and 1 over, with the hopes of, if you caught a big fish or a fish of a lifetime, you could keep it. You could weigh it in at a tournament. But I was trying to encourage the bass anglers, or we sometimes refer to that as like a John boat lake, because it's a 10 horsepower limit. You see a lot of crappie fishermen with John boats. And I was hoping to encourage them, if they're keeping crappie and they're going to fillet fish, they can catch 5 little bass and help us thin them out some to get more of those fish into the slot. So that's our goal, is to actually have people harvest those small fish. I actually wrote a letter to a lot of the bass tournament anglers within the last year or two and say, hey, I know it's in the past been sacrilegious, but when you're, ask your members, or if they're not fishing in a tournament and they're out there during the week, it would really help the bass population to actually thin those little bass out. You're not going to cause any harm. But and we've seen more fish enter into that slot limit, which is what we want to see, because you'll get more and bigger and faster growing fish that way.
Yeah, I agree with that. That in my opinion, that's the most healthy lake cedar that we're talking about. As far as that upper slot, there's a lot of 16 and 17 inch bass in there, just really, really healthy fish. And those 4, 5, and 6 pounders, there might be a lot of them in there, but they're hard to catch sometimes. It's I thought you were going to say they're out of those 4, 5, and 6 pounders.
I'll tell a short story. I finally bought a kayak a few months ago, and I went to Cedar 3 times, and I could not catch a bass to save my life. Now, I'm not a 6 tackle bass angler. Another really awesome little lake no one knows about, it's called Sparta City Lake. It's a little tiny. If you went there and looked at the ramp in the lake, you'd just keep driving. And we shocked it once, and it was so awesome. So I drove up there the day after that, and I caught a warmouth in 6 hours. So it's a humbling experience when you know that they're there and you can't catch the things. Really humbling.
Sounds like a normal tournament day, right?
When I was in graduate school, one of the projects I worked on was looking at shad, and we couldn't start till night. So while we were out there waiting, we would fish right where we were getting ready to start. We couldn't, we didn't hardly catch a thing. And then we'd turn the electricity on, and I don't know how we just didn't snag stuff when we were fishing. There were so many fish there, and we just couldn't. I mean, we sometimes, I hate to say this, it's being recorded, we were using live bait and we couldn't catch fish.
Yeah. So have you ever did that before? Say had a fisherman go down a bank in front of you, and then you come down behind him with a surveying boat just to show him what he was passing up? Because I'm always curious how many fish that we pass up.
We've done actually the opposite of that. If we're out shocking and we see you fishing, we're going to come. We go way out around. We have a foot pedal on there, so when we're pressing the pedal, we're shocking fish. When we let go of the pedal, it's not shocking fish. Now the generator's still running. So if you're ever out there fishing and you see us coming and we see you fishing, we're going to go way out around you, and we're not going to be shocking fish. Well, we were running along, I think it was at Rend or somewhere with riprap on a dam, and we were going out around the guy that was standing there fishing, and he pointed like hey, come fish right here. And so we went right past him, and we turned around about a minute later, and he had a fish on his line. And what'll happen is when we're stunning all these fish, there's a lot of shad that gets stunned. Well, the predators come in and start feeding on those shad. And sometimes they get shocked and sometimes they don't. So you can catch fish right behind us. We hear it all the time. Well, DNR shocked it won't be any good fishing for a year and a half or something. You know, I mean, it's just it's great. If you don't see us, you wouldn't even know we were there because we don't get every fish. I mean, it's not, you can't just go shock a lake out and, you know, a lot of times people are disappointed because they think the whole surface is going to be just frothing with 10-pound bass. And it just doesn't quite work like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen this question come up twice, actually 3 times now. Connor Lacey wants to know what the biggest bass you've seen on a survey and what lake.
10 pounds in Devil's Kitchen. My wife is also a biologist. I have a picture of her with a 10 and a 7.5 in the same picture. And the 7.5, the 7.5 looks like, you know, a 2-pound bass, and the other one looks like a 5-pound bass. But one was a legit 10 and one was 7.5. I've gotten a 9-pound bass out of Carbondale City Lake, but it had a 1-pound bullhead sticking out of its belly. So it was really an 8-pound bass. And again, like I said, that bullhead got stunned and that bass came in and hit it in the field, and then it got laid out.
Oh, so it gained a pound in just a few seconds.
Yeah. But when I started my career, like I said, in South Georgia, Lake Seminole was one of the lakes I managed down there, and we would see 9s and 10s with regularity there, just because of Southern Lake and they just a longer growing season and that type of thing. But we saw, you know, like 5 or 6-pound fish up at Forbes today, and they were in like a foot of water. They were really shallow, and this was at daylight. First hour after daylight when we started shocking up there this morning.
Okay. So where does you hear all these urban legends and urban myths about all these local lakes have the potential state record in them? Here in Missouri, there's 3 lakes within 30 minutes of us that has the state record because it was shocked up, or, you know, where does that come from?
I've been hearing that since I was in college. We would go somewhere and people always ask us, what's the lake record? Well, we don't keep a record by a lake for anglers, you know. But we'll get somewhere and a guy say, well, DNR was here last week and shocked up a 15-pounder. And I said, no, they weren't. Like, they'll argue with me. I'm like, sir, I am the DNR person that shocks, and I did not shock a 15-pound bass here.
Yeah.
So it's just, we call it tavern talk. I mean, that's basically what it is. But this day and age with social media, if I get a state record anything, you're going to see it on Facebook. You know, look at what we caught, and we put it right back in the lake. But they're state records for a reason. They're just not. We had a young boy caught a 3.25-pound crappie at Kincaid about 2 weeks ago, and they were trying to find a certified scale. I was working on the Ohio River. They couldn't get a hold of any of us. And then finally we got over there, and it was a beautiful fish, but it was more than a pound shy of the state record, you know?
Yeah.
So and I always laugh that we obtained a hunting area, fishing area called Burning Star within the last few years, where the fishing had been closed for years and years. And you can't imagine how many people said, there's going to be 3 state records come out of there in the first day or week. And there was guys fishing. They were there at 12:01 midnight the day it opened. And I haven't got a phone call from anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the same thing, there's people have caught these monstrous muskies at Kincaid, but no one's gotten me a picture of what they caught.
So it's a little bit of fishermen just doing what we're notorious for doing.
Now, I will tell you that, like in Evergreen, I think is a lake that's it's in Region 3, which is a few hours here, closer to the Champaign area. In that area, they have seen like a state record muskie and maybe even a state record hybrid in their surveys. And but I mean, that goes right on our Facebook page to let people know, you know, stuff's around. But I haven't sampled any state record fish in my time down here. Now, I've got to handle the crappie from Kincaid a couple years ago, and we see 3s and 3.5s there in our surveys, but never a state record.
Okay. What do you think about the mortality rate of bass that are caught in tournaments and released? Do you see a correlation in that?
I would say in the summer it would be the worst.
Okay.
But most of the tournaments are good in the summer about doing evening tournaments, doing shorter hours, you know, that type of thing. But that's hard on fish, even if you do everything by the book. It's just hard when you pull them, like I said, from the depths of the thermocline. Those big ones want to be down in the coldest water that still has oxygen. Bring them up to the surface and hold them in a live well for a few hours, and then handle them at the weigh in. And I mean, it's not. We've had some tournaments where they've killed quite a few fish, but not a lot, and it's just going to happen.
Okay.
Here's actually a little bit different question here, not bass, but bluegill.
Typically, you're not going to find big bluegill in a public lake. Reason being is everything's competing with them. Where you find big bluegill is in ponds that are strictly bass bluegill, and it tends to be when the bass are stunted at about 14 inches, and they just keep that bluegill population so thinned down that a few bluegill make it, and they get big enough that nothing in there can eat them, and they just keep getting bigger and bigger. The other thing that hurts us in public lakes is, again, multi-species. You've got gizzard shad feeding at the base of the food chain. You've got carp, buffalo, all kinds of stuff eating the same thing that the bluegill do. And then the bass, they're out in this lake. There's 100 shad that are together, slender, no spines. They're going to eat those before they help thin out those bluegill. Now, one thing you will see in some public lakes, you can get good red ear fishing because the red ear down in southern states, they call them a shell cracker. They'll eat slightly different foods than a bluegill, so they can get bigger. We saw some fish, some red ear just shy of a pound at the Golconda Marina last week when we were sampling. Mermet has some beautiful red ear in it. DuQuoin City Lake has some monster red ear. And Cedar has red ear like a farm pond. Now, I haven't seen them, pound, but there's a lot of 8 to 10 inch red ear in Cedar. But a public lake bluegill fishery, 6-7 inches, sometimes 8 is about all you're going to get. We have limited ponds at some of our state parks, but 1 acre pond in a state park, unless it's 6 miles in, it's going to get hammered. So some of the ponds at Giant City, you might be able to catch some, but I mean, you're not going to be able to catch 8 or 10 every time you go and count on it. But red ear is your best bet in a public lake, just because the multi-species thing.
Okay.
And anywhere that has shad, just like if you have a beautiful farm pond with big bluegill, you put shad in it, and in a few years, it's not going to have big bluegill in it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, they're bad. They spread. Jay says, if you catch a striper and you torpedo it down to more comfortable water, does it have a better chance of survival?
That's hard to say. I mean, the smaller fish are probably fine. The problem is the bad part is the big mature trophy fish. You're not getting them in quick. So they're not only coming from real cold water to the hot surface water, but they're also, building up lactic acid from the fight. It's just hard to say, the quicker you can get it in and get it back, the better the chance. But it's just hard to say whether when it swims off, it's going to live or not. Mm-hmm. And the tough part with all this stuff is they've done studies where they've taken fish after a weigh-in at tournaments, and they put them in a holding cage and see if they live. Well, that holding cage in itself is stressful, and it's not a natural type environment. And so it's just hard to say, but that's another reason we do these annual surveys is if we thought the tournament mortality was so high it was detrimental to the population, we'd limit tournaments or change the regulations somehow. That's why we do surveys and occasionally change regulations. But I found that most of the tournament guys are really good about it, just because not only, one, do they get penalized, but two, they want the bass out there as bad as I want the bass out there. Mm-hmm. If they're, handling them bad and killing a bunch of fish, it's not going to be much fun the next time they come. If that happens over and over and over, So I enjoy the tournament aspect of it and working with those guys, and I like that they really, try to take care of their fish. And when I've had arguments about summer tournaments, it's like, I like that they try to have them in the evenings. They're shorter duration. And like I said, if I were to see the bass populations going down in one of my lakes, We just have to, talk about either raising the limit to where the tournaments didn't want to fish there anymore, or limiting the tournaments to non-summer months or something.
Yeah, I think that's over in Egypt. They have a no tournament policy through several of the warmer months of the year, which
Like May through
May through
August, September,
October. I think October's when you can start fishing them again. Yeah. But it is tough to keep those fish alive in the summer, especially throughout the heat of the day. I fished several of those Wednesday nighters over there at Cedar, and it's, your water temperatures do start cooling off there towards the evening, but even those you got to put ice in your live well, and you got to keep some aeration on it just to keep those fish going. It's hard on them, definitely.
There's another good question about the Asian carp there.
They're horrific. They're horrific, here to stay. They're probably definitely impacting the river fisheries. The main thing we're trying to do is keep them out of lakes, because they just a body of water can only support a certain poundage of fish, and these things feed at the base of the food chain. They grow super fast, so even though they reproduce, the young of the year kind of outgrow the young of year predator species that need to feed on them to put on weight. And one thing we watch for is their impact on the shad population, because they're competing directly for food with shad. And like I said, if they're impacting the shad reproduction, then there's nothing for those little bass to eat. You need a wide size range of forage species for the different size predators. Like a 10-pound bass can't eat a 3-pound bluegill, or a 3-inch bluegill loses weight chasing it down. So a big bass needs big prey, and a little bass needs little prey. And when everything's 10 and 20 pounds, that's not doing any of us any good, but there's no way to get rid of them.
Yep.
Now, just your thought. What do you think the chances of them surviving in just a pond or something like that?
They'd survive fine. Now they may not reproduce, but they'll survive. We have them in ponds.
Gotcha.
I had to kill out a pond in Carbondale that when the water got up and a nearby creek got into it, they're in there. But no, they'll live anywhere they can go. It's whether or not they're going to reproduce.
Yeah, actually, Johnny B just asked about with current, and that was my question too. Is I know they live in the river systems with current, so
that's got to do with the way they reproduce. I think their eggs. You'd know more about that.
They need a little bit of current for like the eggs to float. But what I always caution people is the fish don't read the books, and they don't realize that they have to have current to reproduce.
Yeah.
So we don't think they can reproduce, but like I said, if they were to get in, and if you think of like Wren, they start going up into the streams, and that's one thing they're worried about. If they get in the Great Lakes, they'd be fine. But if they go up the tributaries of the Great Lakes and start reproducing, that's the scary part.
Yeah.
But it's just unbelievable how many of them are out there. I'm thankful they don't have teeth or spines. But boy, if somebody could figure out a way to catch them hook and line or a fly rod, man, we'd have people coming from all over the world, because it's unbelievable how many they are, how strong they are, and catching them in the current would be fun. But if I figure it out, I won't be a fish biologist much longer. I'll remember the little people when I'm catching my checks, but I don't know how to catch them. Like I said, if there was a way to catch them hook and line, it would be fun. And they're really good to eat. They're just hard to catch, and it's just something we're going to have to live with.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
This is actually a really good question here. I've always kind of answered our question myself.
I can't claim to be an expert on crawfish. I would give my opinion that in clear water, they're probably going to have more vibrant colors, because we see that with bass, bluegill. We see it with all fish species. I don't know if it's the sunlight has something to do with the pigmentation, but if you catch a fish in crystal clear strip cut water, it's got beautiful colors. And if you catch one in a mud hole somewhere, they're real dark and they're real light. They just don't have those vibrant colors. So I would say that may have something to do with that, but I can't pass myself off as a crawdad specialist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is actually a pretty solid point here.
I think he's giving you a compliment there.
Yeah, I'm not. My way out of that is I haven't fished or surveyed any Missouri lakes.
There you go.
I can tell you, since I've started, and I know there's lakes you're going to go to and you might not have a good day or something, but there's an awful lot of bass in a lot of our lakes, and it seems to me like the good old days are now. The only thing that concerns us a little bit, and I've talked with some of the younger biologists that have come on, technologies you're going to have to maybe adapt in the future, because fish can't hide anymore between this live scope and these depth finders, and they don't catch a break. I mean, they can't hide from you anymore.
Yeah.
Now we haven't seen that be a detriment yet, but when you can go out and actually see the size crappie you're fishing for anytime you want to, that's a game changer.
Yeah, it's the technology. Hit that one from 3 Pound. You were just talking about crappie. Here's Matt from over there on Lake of Egypt. He's got a question for you.
No, actually, the complaint I've had the last couple of years is people can't catch their unders. Is the complaint I've had, and some of the guides had said that they can catch their overs but not their unders, and that lake gets a lot of pressure and a lot of harvest, and you want those small crappie to be able to take the place of the bigger ones as they're cropped off. We'll actually be doing our Wren Lake survey next Monday and Tuesday. That's a shocking survey. And then we go back in about the third week in October and do a trap net survey just for the crappie. So we monitor it every single year. And since that reg's been on, and it's been a good reg. I know some people don't like it, but it sure has, seems to me it's helped the population structure over there.
Okay. Let's stay on here for about 5 more minutes for us, and we'll finish up.
Absolutely. Yep.
Great. This is fun. This is very insightful stuff.
Yes.
I got a question. Do bass prefer certain vegetation over others? Have you noticed, like in shocking, or actually, let me rephrase that. Do you shock greater volumes of fish in certain shoreline cover, say a laydown versus grass, or lily pads versus, a dock? Have you seen any kind of similarity or any kind of pattern in that?
We'll typically see more at a laydown, because when there's a log, it's isolated and everything, whereas if it's a big weed bed, the fish are spread out in it as we're running along it. But anywhere if you're fishing spring or fall and you see an area that says that ought to hold fish, it's got fish in it.
Yeah.
If we'll run along a whole bunch of shoreline and not see a thing, and then you get up on a down tree and you'll see 30 crappie and a bunch of nice bass, and it's just amazing what's there.
So they're there. We're just not catching them.
Correct.
Okay.
Means we better not quit our day jobs.
That's we just got to keep practicing, keep working, never give up.
Let's see here. This is actually why we'll have that on there.
Yes, we do surveys every year, and we write kind of summaries on it called Fisheries Fact Sheet. All that information is on that website I had mentioned earlier. It's ifishillinois, which is spelled out, .org. And it's got, it'll have all the biologists for the different counties. If you're looking for a biologist, it'll have all the lake reports. It'll typically, all the fish attractor I do, the fish attractor maps for all the lakes I work on, and the other local biologists, they're all on that website. Now, if you email me and you want Kincaid, Wren, Murfreesboro, I'll send them to you, but they're also on that website. And my attractor sites don't change. If it's not artificial stuff that lasts forever, we add woody vegetation to those same sites every 1 to 2 or 3 years. So there's always something there. You don't have to keep getting yearly maps from me. If you have my coordinates, there's going to be something at those locations. The only place where we typically are adding new things is at Rend, and they keep that updated online. That one's available online, and you can get that one as well.
Here's this is actually, I've actually talked to several people that fish over at Kincaid, and they've said this too. I'm just getting your input on this one.
I've seen more and more at both lakes since I've been here, and I can't explain why that is, but I've started to see more in Kincaid and in Cedar. It used to be we just got a flathead, it was like a surprise. Now it's not as common as you'll see it at Rend or at Cedar, or I'm sorry, Rend or Baldwin or a place like that that's known for it. But we are seeing more and more of them.
Yeah, and you typically catch them in the late hours of a tournament, and you're looking for a big kicker fish, and you hook into that 6, 7, 8 pound flathead out deep on a point.
I will tell you one place. We went out to Little Grassy one time, late summer. The hatchery needed like 25 or 30 what we call brood red-ear sunfish, meaning adult red-ear for the hatchery system there at Little Grassy Fish Hatchery in Macanda. And we saw, I think they were in fairly shallow spawning, probably 10 flatheads that went over 20 pounds.
Jeez.
It was amazing. And there was a young lady that I guess, noodling's a big thing at Wren, and she made like I think it was about a 69-pound flathead she caught. There was a group of women that went, and she had one on her back. I was like, I don't know if I could lift that thing at my advanced age.
Some tough girls.
But I will caution people: if you catch one of those flatheads, do not take it home and put it in your pond, because they're a predator and they're eating they're going to eat your hand-sized bluegill, your bass. I mean, if you stock a 30-pound flathead in your farm pond, it's not eating 3-inch bluegill. It's eating the fish you want to eat and catch.
Yeah, they can clean a lake. We've got a couple of them in our 5-acre lake in our subdivision lake, and they clean house. They eat a lot of bluegill, so they're not good to have in a small lake.
So here's one from Connor about Wren Lake.
That's a great question. It's a river, what we call a river run reservoir. It has horrible habitat because one, the siltation, just the soil composition there. You can't get weeds to grow there. We've tried some plantings, and any lake really, if there's not weeds there, there's a reason. It's not because I'm too lazy to go out and try to plant them. They just won't live. The other thing we find at Wren, if the water comes up in the spring and stays up, you get a great year class of bass. The water's up in the button bush or whatever kind of habitat's up high. That if you get a big spring rain, it comes up, and then those bass go to nest, and then the water comes down, it wipes out the spawn. And in a lake that big, you just can't afford to have missing year classes, and there's just not a whole lot you can do. You just can't add the spawning habitat because the substrate's so soft. And so there's not a lot of good places for them to spawn, and 2, for the little ones to hide. So what we try to do is supplementally stock young year fish every year. Last week, we just drained 3 ponds over there and stocked, I think it was about 42,000 3 to 4 inch bass. And then the hatchery gave us another, I think about 30,000 this year, which is about double what we've been able to stock in recent years. But we had 2 good year classes of bass. So I'm anxious to see what we see next Monday and Tuesday. But it does not have, we typically get anywhere from 30 to 60 bass an hour there. Kincaid, Cedar, Devil's Kitchen, all that, it's well over 100. And it's the habitat and the fishing pressure. But it's mainly a habitat thing.
How long will it take those fingerling bass to reach, say, that magic 14-inch number?
Probably 2 years. If there's a lot of forage over there with the way there's plenty of gizzard shad. It's just that the bass need to successfully reproduce. So you want to pray for spring rains, but you want the water to stay up for weeks, not go up and then come down 4 days later and strand all those nests. Or when those bass are making nests out in a big flat with not a weed within a quarter mile, they don't have a chance with the crappie, the yellow bass, and everything in there that's going to eat them.
Yeah. Got another one there for you from Johnny.
You cannot add brush legally to Illinois lakes without permission. I can't ever give permission because the 3 main lakes I work on are potable water supply lakes. One, Cedar won't even let me add brush because they don't want any organic matter added to the lake. So the only thing we were able to put in Cedar was the PVC porcupine balls, and I had to beg for that. Now, I get calls all the time, where'd you put those trees at Cedar the other day? And I'm like, I didn't put any trees in Cedar. And they say, well, we saw a load of trees come down the lake. And I'm like, that wasn't me. So we know it goes on, but it's not legal. And you got to be real careful, especially like at Cedar or Kincaid and Wren. You got people skiing, diving in the water, and and it's drinking water. So you can't have people dumping old car bodies that have oil and gas still in them and all that kind of thing. So we try to add stuff. I love doing it. I don't like being in the office. I like being out. So the wintertime, I've got 10 of those cube fish attractors I'm going to put out at Kincaid sometime here in November or December, I hope. And we're going to try to build some more of those for Rend. They've done a great job at Shelbyville putting a bunch of those out, but we can't really give free rein for people to go out and sink stuff just because of the liability, and we just don't know who's going to put what where, but we know that it goes on.
Yeah. This is another good one here. Oh, not that. Sorry, not that one. I was looking at this one. Sorry.
Is there any recommend? No, not really. For a while, I was asking for people to send me striper pictures at Cedar because they're very difficult to sample, and I can't argue with limited resources. We need to keep stocking them when I can't catch them and show that they're doing well. But I know anglers were keeping them. So there's certain situations like that. We also have some tagged fish like muskies at Pyramid and Kincaid that have our phone numbers on it. And if you catch one of them, we always ask, just call us with the date, the length of the fish, and we can give you the history of that fish. Don't take the tag out if you can, avoid taking the tag out of it. But occasionally they may have like surveys where they'll ask people to keep a diary, but it's more of if populations are really in trouble. And like I said, we're really blessed around here with some good fishing populations.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. George wants to know, was it your recommendation that they're putting the trees in the New Athens strip pits?
I don't cover that particular county.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
And how long does it take a bass in, say, Cedar or Kincaid to get up to 4-pound class?
When I got here, occasionally we will take fish for contaminant analysis, like to check and make sure they're healthy to eat. And one of the first years I was here, we have to take small fish and big fish. And I hate cutting an 18-inch bass, but every few years we'll take like 5 of them and cut them. And so when we did that at Kincaid, there's a floating bone in their head called an otolith that puts a ring on like a tree does for every year of growth. You can't really look at a fish, even at their scale, even though the scales put annuli on, and know for sure how old it is. But that bone will tell you how old that fish is, but it's hard to cut the head off and turn that fish loose again. You know what I mean? So, yeah. But since we kept these 5 beautiful fish, I was like, well, we're going to do an age test on them. Those fish were 12 years old.
Really?
And they were fat and healthy, but it's like I said, I've noticed that Kincaid and Cedar, they're real slow growing till they get to about 14 inches. And then they just, I think their mouth's big enough to eat shad from the previous year, spotted suckers, all the other prey species that are available, and they just take off. So because they're slow growing, they live long. Whereas in Lake of Egypt, Baldwin, that might be 3 years, but that fish might only live to age 5 because they just grew so fast they almost burnt themselves out.
Huh. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and you'll see that in like Canadian type fisheries. Some of those fish are like 30 some years old. Some of those muskies and that type of thing. They're very slow growing, but they're long lived. So that's the trade off.
That makes a lot of sense. Like I said, I didn't notice like stuff in my pond. We had a lot of 8 and 9 inch fish when we first started, but it was probably 5-6 years before we really seen any kind of difference.
Yeah. Well, and it's not an overnight type thing when you have a stunted bass population, because what they do is they hammer those bluegill so much, there's not a large range of bluegill. And like I said, if you see a stunted population like that, occasionally you'll get a big bass out of that lake, and it might be it's what we call all head. It has like a 8-pound head, but there's no meat on it, because it'd be like you or I eating a grain of sand one at a time, or I'm sorry, a piece of rice one at a time. You're actually losing calories with that motion. So a big bass feeding on something small just isn't getting the conversion rate it needs to keep on weight or get bigger.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And is it true that when those large bass reach the end of their life, will they lose some weight as well?
It's hard. It's hard to say. I mean, we've seen some that you can tell they're old. They just look like they've been through the ringer, but we don't see a lot of dead fish. I mean, and typically when you see a fish kill, the fish are in pretty bad shape by the time it's reported to us and we go look at it. But we don't see many of them like die because they're skin and bones. We may sample 300 or 400 bass in a survey. 1 or 2 of them will look awful, but they'll have some kind of hook wound or something in their mouth. Yeah. That I don't think it's an old age thing. It's just sometimes they'll get wounded or have a lure. We caught one with a lure in its mouth the other day, and just that type of thing. But we don't see old, real skinny fish. We just don't see that in our surveys.
Let's get 1 or 2 more questions here and let Shawn out of here. This has been really
this one
nice.
Here was actually a pretty good question here.
Yes, the porcupines were part of I'm trying to remember what they called it. It was the stimulus project under Obama, where they talked about having shovel-ready jobs. And I suggested it to the Forest Service, being a federal agency. So they were able to get a bunch of grant money through the federal government. There was people at the Jobs Corps that put them together for us, and we put those out. At the time, they were like the best bang for the buck in terms of price and everything. I'm not a fan of them for public lakes anymore, just because they're built so cheaply. They're great for a private pond, but I don't know how well they hold up in a public lake. And I've also heard, people are moving them all over the place because there's no weight to them. You can sometimes you can hook them on your line and pull them up but people were grappling for them and moving them around. And if they stayed in the lake, that's fine. They're still there. I'd rather they be where we put them. But I've switched over to trying to build more of these. They call them Shelbyville cubes or Georgia cubes, PVC with black corrugated pipe wound all through them. They're bigger. They're heavier duty. I had an Eagle Scout build me some, and we put some in Kincaid. And like I said, I've got Kincaid has what's called a lake management fund that some of the clubs have donated money. And if I need something, so we spent $1,000 to build these fish attractors, and I'll sink those at some of the existing locations out there. Wood's the best. It's just hard to find. We sink Christmas trees just because we're recycling them, but we're not getting as many trees as we used to. A lot of people have gone artificial. The trees last 3 to 5 years, depending on where you put them. But natural stuff's the best, but it's limited in supply, and so we've also gotten to where we're putting some of these, like a cement bucket with some of the fiber optic tubes. They call them spiders or trees or something like that. So we've put some other things in addition to the porcupines. But at Cedar, the only thing that's in there is those porcupines. And like I said, I had to threaten. I asked 3 times, and I said, I'm going to put them in Kincaid if you won't let me put them there. And they finally relented and let me at least put those porcupine balls in Cedar.
Okay. And how do you determine like a location for fish attractors?
What I typically do is most people can find fish in the spring and the fall in shallow water. Typically in the summer, those fish are scattered. And the way our lakes were built, there's very little structure left or was ever in deeper water. So when those fish move off the shallows in the summer, they're hard to pattern for the most part. So I typically tried to put most of my fish attractors between like 10 and 15 foot deep. One, because there's no habitat typically out that deep in our lakes. 2, if people are swimming and diving or driving over them with a boat, they're not going to hit anything on them. And another thing I try to do is if there's any shoreline areas like piers, I always try to put some there for the shoreline anglers, because the boat people, they can find habitat too. But for the most part, I don't like putting them in shallow water because if they're artificial, people move them on us easier. And 2, you always got to worry about somebody swimming on or diving on them or something like that. And typically there's always down trees or riprap or something in the shallow that provides habitat. So I always have been putting mine like 10 to 15 feet. And the other reason is in the heat of the summer, sometimes most of our lakes, regardless of depth, Devil's Kitchen is a little different, but the rest of them, there's no oxygen below 15 or 20 feet. So if you're putting fish attractors at 25 feet, they're only using them at certain times of the year. Whereas they can use them all summer if they're in 10 to 15 feet of water.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
All right. I got one question.
So I put that up there. Say Gary said best
We'll let
show
you go.
yet. So big thanks to you and your information.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Final question for me, at least. This is a short, big question. Why do shad make a migration into the shallows in the fall?
I don't know if they're forced there by schooling fish. Some of the gizzard shad, they're a plankton eater, meaning they're filter feeding microscopic plants and animals. But they've also been known to feed on what we call detritus, which is stuff on the bottom. So I don't know. Like I had mentioned earlier in the show, that shallow water where the sunlight can get to is the productive area, and that's where the insects and that type of thing are going to be. And that's why you'll see buffalo carp and all that kind of stuff working in shallow water. And it might be because of that. One way you can fight that in like a pond or a lake is you can do what we call a fall drawdown. And that forces all those bait fish away from the habitat into the open water when the predators are wanting to put on a feed. So if you have problems with skinny bass or too many shad, you can do what's called a fall drawdown, and that gets them out of that shallow water. So it may just be that they're trying to get into habitat to hide somewhat from the bass, but I can't say for sure what that reason would be.
Yeah, nature's doing a drawdown on my pond right now.
Yeah, we've seen that in quite a few places.
Yeah.
But that's actually, like I said, for bass purposes, that's a good thing in terms of thinning out, the prey base and helping those predators put on meat for the winter.
I've never thought about it that way. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah,
that's like throwing when you throw 20, 30 pounds of those fathead minnows in a pond. It's like a smorgasbord for
they
a couple of days.
They don't last long.
Yeah, they don't last.
If you've got a minute, I would just tell, don't ever do that just because you're wasting your money. I've talked with a lot of homeowners groups and things like that, and I'll ask, well, what do you do out here? I'm trying to get a feel for how they're managing the fish. Well, we spend $1,000 on fathead minnows every year to feed the bass. I'm like, to feed the bass for about a day and a half. I'm like, they're not reproducing. The conversion rate for bass is horrible. It's about 10%, meaning if you had a 1 pound bass in a little swimming pool in your backyard, you would have to feed that bass 10 pounds of fathead minnows to get it to 2 pounds. And so the people have wasted a lot of money on fathead minnows. When you initially stock the pond and you're putting in fingerling fish, you put fatheads in, then they spawn. And then when the bass get big enough, they wipe them out within a year, but it's just a tremendous bonus for that first year class of bass. But after that, you're wasting your money putting fatheads in a pond or a lake.
So bluegill is probably the main, bluegill and maybe small crappie are the main forage for bass in a pond. Probably not crappie.
Well, that's a major rule number one that people break is putting crappie in a pond. Crappie have ruined more farm ponds than anything else because they're what we call a cyclic spawner, and every 3, 4, or 5 years, we're not sure why, they just get off a tremendous spawn, and we see that boom and bust situation in lakes where you'll have a year class move through, and that's why one year the crappie's awesome and then it starts going downhill. Sometimes we use creel limits and or minimum length limits to try to even that boom bust cycle and smooth it out so it's not so boom and bust every year. But yeah, don't ever. I've had people call me and they'll ask about 10 different ways, and I just tell them, you can ask however you want. I would never tell you to put crappie in a farm pond. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, what if we do it this way? I'm like, no. Well, what if we do that? I'm like, no. I'm like, it's your pond, do what you want. I'm just telling you, once they overpopulate, they're about 4 inches. Their eyes are about the size of a quarter, and you can hold them up to the sun and see their bones. And you can't fix that. You got to kill the lake out or drain it and start over. Then it's 5 years till it's worth fishing again. So don't ever do that.
Yeah. You're exactly right. So it's a bluegill thing, I guess. Bluegill bass relationship.
A farm pond, and a lot of your listeners probably won't want to hear this. A farm pond should be managed for bluegill. There's just not enough space or resources to produce a lot of big bass. You can have some good bass, but one of the worst things that's happened to pond management is some of these 3 or 4 or 5 years. We're not sure why, they just get off a tremendous fishing shows where they're catching 10-pound fish every other cast in Mexico or Alabama or something. It's just not a realistic thing in our area. You can have a good bass population, but like I said, for the majority of farm ponds, they should be managed for those 1-pound bluegill.
Okay, great. Well, we'll let you go, Shawn. We got a ton of comments that are just saying how good of a show this was and how everybody appreciates you sharing your knowledge with us. And me and Greg feel the same way. So thanks a lot for coming on here and talking with us this evening. I'm going to go back and listen to this and just write some of this stuff down, and so I can keep it in my pocket with me every time I go out on the lake.
And we'll need that map of where you drop them porcupines too.
I have them. They're at ifishillinois.org. Well, I can tell you where I did put them. Now, whether they're still there or not, I can't promise you that. No, I appreciate the chance to get out. People get upset with us sometimes because they don't see us, so they don't know what we do. So this is a good way for us to explain what we do and why we do it. There's a lot of people that think, I don't know why they think my goal is to ruin fishing anywhere. I want it to be good. I don't want people mad at us. So if people have questions, email me, call me. Just know, especially this time of year, we're on the water almost every day. It might take me a couple of days to get back with you, but I promise I'll return your call or your email. But I will tell you, I only work, like I said, Jackson County and the Wren Lake Complex. If you have specific lake questions, get on that website, ifishillinois.org, and it will give you the contact person for every biologist in the state of Illinois.
Okay.
That's cool.
Great.
That's great news.
Yeah,
and we got the lake summaries and what we've stocked and all that kind of info too. So
okay. Great. Well, you guys are doing a great job over there. I consider the Southern Illinois some of the best fisheries in the area. Hands down. So keep up the good work.
Well, I appreciate it.
All right. Well, we will talk to you, I guess. Hopefully we'll talk to you again sometime. So get you back
maybe on down
there.
the road, man.
Yeah. But I only got another 6 to 10 years, and then I'm going to start fishing a whole lot.
Yeah, we'll touch base between in the next 6 to 10 years. Get an update. We'll get some new round of questions because we'll sit there and soak on this and come up with some new questions. But we'll let you go, Shawn. Once again, appreciate it, and be safe out there in the water.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks, man.
That was a lot to soak in. Like I was just saying, I'm gonna go back and rewatch this tomorrow. And thanks you guys. There's a lot of good stuff on there. Thanks guys for asking some really, really good, solid questions.
You guys were killing it there.
That's why.
I was gonna say, I even told Gabe before we started, I had 5-6 questions wrote down, and I said, I don't even know if we'll get to all of our questions because you guys are gonna be asking questions constantly.
Lots of good questions.
It was more than I anticipated, big time.
Yeah, excellent show. Appreciate you guys for participating. Yeah, hit the thumbs up for us if you don't mind. If you haven't subscribed to either one of our channels, please do that. It helps us out immensely. And man, it's cool to have somebody that's doing all the behind the scenes work, and you're finding out why they do certain things. And somebody like Shawn that's been at it for 26 years, he's seen cycles of these lakes that he's working on or working at.
And that's something we even talk about regularly is it's the cycles. Why is it down now? Why is it good 3 years ago? And that's just those lakes going through those cycles. I mean, it makes a big difference. Last year at my local lake, we hit it. I guess last year was the really good year. In the fall, that lake was just phenomenal, and we caught a lot of 3, 4, 5 pound bass. And it hasn't been that way in probably 7-8 years. So we just finally hit that cycle, and then hopefully, a little bit left for this year, I hope.
And like Shawn said, if you have questions or like for me in particular, I'm going to be taking some pictures of some of this aquatic vegetation that's been growing on cedar that I've had questions about. It just kind of showed up. So I'm definitely going to be taking some pictures of that and sending that to the website. I think did you put a link of some sort to some of that stuff in the description?
I've got his email in there, and I've also got his phone number, which he said to put in there.
Okay.
So it's all down in the description, guys. You guys can go in there, look him up, send him an email, send him pictures of this stuff, picture of the fish, whatever you want to do. So
yeah. So and if you're out on the water and you see some kind of strange fish that you don't know what it is, I'm sure he can identify that for you. Or if you catch a you know, a 6-pound crappie, maybe shoot him an email, let him know he'd like to see that.
Yeah,
Things like that. So, but yeah, once again, thanks so much. And I think we're going to get off here. It's been a great stream. We really appreciate it. It's inspiring. So,
yep. You guys make sure you, we'll post this tomorrow. Post on our Facebook page, probably post a link. I'll probably post on Instagram. You know, if you guys can, make sure you guys share this. I mean, share as much as you possibly can. We really greatly appreciate it. So
yeah, it's going to help us out a lot. And thanks everybody. I'm seeing Little Drummer on here. What's up, Jeremy? I haven't seen you on here in a while. There's a lot of new names on here.
Who's that? Mike Marful.
Mike Marful. I don't know. I haven't seen him in years.
Yeah.
He got us home from Pickwick safely last night. So David's in here. Yeah. Good night, guys. We'll talk to you guys next week. Appreciate everything.
See you, everybody.
Peace.